My name's Allen Hart. In today's video, we're going to look at hybrid heat pumps. I'm over at Viva Training Academy in Halifax, and we've got the technical trainer here from Daikin, and he's going to do a training course today and talk about hybrid heat pumps. So let's go into that training course.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. So we're here today to talk about the Daikin Altherma hybrid monoblock, which is this boiler and this heat pump over here. So a little bit about Daikin first. We're the biggest global manufacturer of air conditioning, coming up to 100 years this year. Developed some firsts, first packaged heat pump in 1951, first VRV system for commercial heating and cooling in the 80s. Headquartered in Japan, manufacturing facilities all over Europe. The European headquarters is in Europe, and they were very much the driver of domestic heating for Daikin. And in the UK, we're headquartered in Weybridge in southwest London. So what are we focusing on here? Consumers who maybe their gas boiler is broken down, they want to replace it quickly. They want to lower their heating bills, they want to use renewable energy, they want a reliable renewable solution, they don't want to change their radiators, or they haven't got much space. So these are the sorts of people we can target with our hybrid monoblock. So rather than just changing a combi boiler for another combi boiler, how can we help these customers with what they want? So it's a hybrid. I mean, we're familiar with hybrid cars. We're familiar as a country with solar, lots of solar going in, and so we're thinking about heat pumps for these sorts of customers as well who are interested in renewables. Do they want a heat pump? Perhaps they haven't got room for a cylinder. So this is a combi boiler, as we'll come to in a minute, so you don't need to find space for a cylinder. Do they want to be a bit greener? Perhaps they don't want to jump all the way to a full heat pump solution yet. Obviously, we want everybody to go down the full heat pump route, but we're aware that not everybody's there yet. Maybe they really can't find space for a cylinder. Maybe their home isn't ready for a heat pump for a number of different reasons. Maybe their radiators need high temperature water. They'd have to upgrade their radiators. Perhaps they're not ready for that. Maybe they've got outstanding items on their EPC certificate, so they can't access the boiler upgrade scheme funding at the moment. Or maybe the customer's just worried about what's going to happen to gas supplies. They want to reduce their reliance on gas. So as I mentioned, the Daikin Hybrid, it's a combi boiler and it's a heat pump. So this is the heat pump bit, and on the wall we've got the combi boiler. So it's default setup. It'll replace a combi boiler, and it gives the customer an opportunity to reduce their reliance on gas. There is an optional solar photovoltaic adapter which can help to consume any excess of solar. It's natural gas as standard, but there's also an LPG conversion kit for customers on LPG. It can be connected to a cylinder if they want to store hot water. And we've got two sizes of combi, 28 or 32, and there's an adapter to connect to the Daikin cloud and make use of our app. So how could this be a benefit to you? It's something different for you to offer your customers rather than just another combi boiler that can separate you from the competition. And with boiler replacements being a bit of a price fight, it gives you a chance to make a bit more profit potentially on a heat pump installation instead. It's a good opportunity to develop your technical knowledge, begin installing heat pumps. We've got a 7-year end-user warranty on these hybrid systems when they're purchased through our sustainable home centres, and it's supported by Daikin marketing campaign. So hopefully people have seen our marketing campaign on this out there, particularly on social media. And there's a little bit on training later. We've got full Daikin training available for these products and technical support. The end-user warranty is supported by Daikin engineers if there is a fault with the system. And we've got our Sustainable Home Centre sort of loyalty points as well. So how can it benefit your business? you want to invest in it, you want to grow it. You've got your eye on what's happening sort of in the future of boilers, and so it's an opportunity to start adding heat pumps to that portfolio. It's a good entry level heat pump system for that. You want to differentiate yourself from the competition a bit by offering that option and talking to people about those sorts of solutions. Maybe you need a compact solution, so it's no larger than regular boilers. It's quick and easy to install. I'll go over these points in a bit more detail. And it's a reliable system that you can fit and forget. So what's involved in installing one of these? It's a pretty simple concept here. So we've got the heat pump. That goes outside. So that white line there is differentiating the wall between inside and outside. The warmed water flowing from the heat pump, it flows into the combi boiler, which is inside. The water pump, it's in the boiler, so there's no additional pump to install. That will pump the warmed water, boost the temperature if necessary around the heating system, and rather than returning back through the boiler, the return from the heating system goes straight back into the heat pump. So 3 points of a triangle in terms of the installation setup. So the mechanical installation is quite straightforward. There's not a lot of electrical connections. You don't need to be MCS certified to install one of these. Sorry? Because it doesn't qualify for the boiler upgrade scheme funding. So in order to access that, you'd need to be MCS or under an MCS umbrella scheme, but this is outside the scope of that. You don't need to be F-gas, you just need to be gas safe. It can also connect into an existing system, which I think we've got a slide on as well, in terms of the heat pump could be added to an existing combi boiler system. But I'll cover the ins and outs of that in a minute. So what we've put together here is two packages, one with a 28 kilowatt boiler and one with a 32 kilowatt boiler, with some special pricing for the promotion that we're running on the on this hybrid system. So with the 28 kilowatt and all of those parts, that's pound under 3,000, and it's another £200 for the 32 kilowatt boiler option. So that comes with the heat pump, the boiler. It comes with the mounting jig, which is what that's sitting on. The boiler is the front part. There's another 100mm section on the back of that, which includes the pipework connections, and it includes the expansion vessel. Includes flexible hoses, a cosmetic cover to neaten up the pipework, isolating ball valves for the heat pump, flue for the boiler, antifreeze valves, come onto those in a minute, mounting feet, the controller, which is essential to have for the system to operate, filling loop, magnetic filter, and a 20-litre volumizer to make sure we've got the right system volume. So that's the pack. Delve into a little bit more detail on the product itself. So this is our monoblock hydro split system. So we have had, if you come across it, a refrigerant split. So there's two parts, indoor and outdoor, connected by refrigeration lines. I'll come to it a little bit more in a minute. This is water connections only, so this is a monoblock heat pump. You would need to be F-gas for the hybrid one, yeah. So it's these two heat sources I've mentioned. It's the heat pump plus the boiler, and I'll come to it in a minute. It's true hybrid operation. Both heat sources can operate together. If you're looking at some of the competition, heat pump or boiler, if you've got both of our components, they'll operate together. It's the best of both worlds. It's a good transition step towards a fully renewable heating system. Get the customer familiar with heat pumps, confident with heat pumps, they get a good lifespan out of this, and ready for them to put in a full heat pump solution in the years ahead. So as I mentioned, the hybrid system can operate in three modes. We've got heat pump only, boiler only, or both operating together, and we're calling this true hybrid operation. For some of our competitors, as I mentioned, you can only have the heat pump or the boiler. Here we get both, and that significantly helps with the running costs. So if we look at the at a year, perhaps the heating season, -7 to +15. The biggest chunk of the heating demand over the course of a year, we're expecting that to be the heat pump only, followed by both operating together, and then when it's really cold, with boiler only operation, when the heat pump can't deliver the performance required. So this is the schematic I showed you before. So on space heating, they're in series, so you can have the heat pump only operating. The boiler then it pumps through the boiler, but the boiler doesn't add any heat. If the heat pump can't deal with that, and I'll come to that in a minute, the boiler will start adding some heat into the heating system as well. Or just the boiler can operate, and again the heat pump's still in the circuit, but the water will just pump through it, and the boiler will be adding all the heat. So for space heating, we've got those three modes of operation. Now for domestic hot water, it's the boiler only, so it's a combi boiler as in its standard setup, and so that will do by itself all of the hot water. Well, the advantages of that is that the heat pump can continue to operate in space heating while you've gone away to the boiler to do some hot water. So what's the logic behind this in terms of how it decides what it's going to operate at any given time? You can actually program two different modes into this system. Economical mode, so that's based on energy prices, or we've got ecological mode where it's dependent on carbon factors, so that's the amount of CO2 emitted for gas or electricity. And you can actually program these into the user interface, so you can tell it what the user is paying for their electricity or gas. We're expecting 90% of installations to probably focus on the economical mode.
Why if they don't tell us at different times?
That's something we're working on at the moment. At the moment, there's only one tariff that you can put into it, but that's something that we need to sort of combine with scheduling to look at that. So when will it operate the heat pump only? So it will keep looking at this all of the time, and it will look at the coefficient of performance. So that's the efficiency of the heat pump, and it will look at which is actually more efficient at the moment in terms of cost. Is that the heat pump or is it the boiler? So where the heat pump is the most efficient, and when it can cover the complete heat load for the property, it will operate the heat pump only. When it starts bringing the boiler in hybrid operation, that's when the heat pump can't cover the complete heat load, but the heat pump is still the most economical to operate. And then you get the simultaneous operation of both. So if the heat pump is no longer the most economical, and actually gas gives the lowest running costs for the user, or you're below the operating temperature of the heat pump, outside its sort of operating range at that particular time, the boiler will come in to cover the complete heat load for the property. But as I say, we're expecting that to be the smallest proportion of the heating requirement over the course of a year. So as I mentioned before, which customers we're looking at for this? So replacing a broken boiler. Customers wanted to cut their carbon footprint, reduce their gas usage. They just want to invest in their home and start adding renewables. But perhaps they can't go down the full route of changing the radiators, putting a hot water tank in, because obviously that significantly adds to the cost of putting a heat pump system in. So it's a fast and easy installation, hybrid. We're expecting it to be installed in less than 2 days for most systems. Even you might be able to get it into 1 day if you've got a couple of people on it, and you can get the electrician in there as well. So we could see as little as 4 years payback against a G-rated boiler. But whichever you're looking at, you can use 70% less gas, and you're saving 1,200 kilograms of carbon per year, which is about 5,000 miles in an average UK car. So that's a significant chunk of carbon saving as well. So I'll go through all these features and benefits individually. So it's compact, it's plug and play, it's ready to go. It's got high efficiency heat exchanger. We'll cover the freezing protection, sort of safety for the system. As mentioned, you don't need F-gas. It's quick and easy to install, and it's a hydro split concept. So rather than concentrating on those here, I've got a slide for each one. So it's a compact unit, so it should fit in place of most existing combi boilers. You can install it in cupboards, narrow spaces, and it shouldn't be taking up any more space than an existing boiler. There is a small digital display on the front of the boiler, which we'll see in the training video when we come to that. So the majority of the hydraulic components are in the outdoor unit. The pump, though, is in the boiler. So you haven't got anything else to find space for. You haven't got to find somewhere to put a water pump. The expansion vessel can sit in the jig behind the boiler. So the end user shouldn't see any loss of space inside their property to accommodate this compared to a boiler they might have already had. So it's ready to go. We've put together all the essential components that you need for installation. Obviously not pipe work and insulation and the little ancillaries, things like that. But in terms of the major components that you'll need, that's all part of our pack. Pumps in the boiler. You might need to increase the system volume with a volumizer, so that depends on the capacity of the heating system. That's something that's actually covered in our training course to make sure that those requirements are met. So we've got compatibility with quite a range of pipe sizes. Need to be a little bit careful with micro bore. Might actually need to get some sort of hydraulic separation between the heating system and the heat pump boiler circuit to actually work with micro bore. But that's possible as well. One of my colleagues has actually got one of these installed with hydraulic separations, and that works absolutely fine to keep everything working. And you can work with quite long pipe runs as well, as long as they're sufficiently sized. And one of the big bonuses or features of this particular equipment is that you can keep the existing radiators. I'll come to it in a minute, but using the boiler, you can get the temperature up to 80 degrees. So that should be compatible with any heating system. Obviously, you don't really want to run it at 80 if you can help it. You want to be running it lower than that for best efficiency, but it will deal with whatever heating system is already in the property. 55. So once you've got yeah. Although you can go above 55 with the heat pump will take it up to 55, and then the boiler will take it up a little bit further. So just because you need to go over 55, you're not necessarily ruling out the heat pump operating at all, but it really depends what return temperature then comes back. If you're really boosting it up with a boiler and it doesn't come back low enough for the heat pump to continue to operate, then yes, you will be outside the operating range of the heat pump. But you can go higher than 55 with the heat pump still operating as long as the return temperature is coming back low enough for it to keep working. So it's a high efficiency boiler. It's a 2-in-1 heat exchanger. So it's actually got a separate circuit in the heat exchanger for the heating and the hot water. So we've got a number of advantages to this. Firstly, you've got a lower water inlet temperature going into the heat exchanger for hot water and heating, so that's maximising the efficiency of that. The circulation pump only needs to operate in space heating mode, so there's no secondary circuit, there's no secondary heat exchanger, which also helps with reliability and noise if they're using hot water at night. Less components, high reliability, so that's a good reliable boiler, this one. So you can fit that with confidence, and you know that it's going to keep working. So I mentioned that it's 80 degrees flow. We've got a little chart on the right which shows where it's in or outside the scope of the heat pump. So quite a big chunk of the operating range is within the scope of the heat pump. And with water temperature up to 80, that maximises the compatibility with heating systems.
65 or something like that. What happens to heat pump?
The heat pump just won't work.
So it just turns off.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine with it. It's quite happy for it to circulate water at that temperature, but it just can't operate the heating system. So this is good for retrofit applications. I mean, hybrids do go into new build as well. Obviously, that won't be allowed once boilers are banned in new build properties. Majority of new build properties are going down the monoblock heat pump route. So hybrid is good for retrofit. So you don't need to do as much work on replacing parts of the heating system. One advantage for you with the hybrid being able to operate up to 80, if you're not changing radiators, you haven't got to fit a hot water system, it's easier for you to quote. You know the boiler can do the job, whatever the heating system they've got there at the moment is. So that makes it quicker to turn around quotes. You haven't got to go through the full assessment of the heat loads of each room. Do I need to change the radiators? So that's an advantage for actually getting the job quoted. And if you do need to replace any radiators for whatever reason, then you don't need to select them as large as you might for a heat pump only solution. So yeah, I've said it before, keep the existing radiators. We are actually looking at the moment at the possibility of just being able to fit the boiler first. So one of our targets with this is the distressed purchase, as we call it, where the existing heating system, the boiler's broken down. You want to get that back up and running as quickly as possible. So we're looking at the moment at just the possibility of installing the boiler first and then fitting the heat pump to it later. Now that boiler is customised for us specifically. It expects to talk to the heat pump. So if you just put that in by itself as it stands and the heat pump isn't there, no, I don't want to do that because I haven't got the heat pump to talk to. Don't know what I'm doing. So we're looking at the moment the possibility of making some tweaks to that so that the boiler can be installed separately by itself first, and then you can come back and fit the heat pump at some stage in the next year when there's the time and opportunity, and there isn't the pressure of getting it all done to get the heating system back up and running. So I mentioned safety in the headline. This is particularly the safety of the system, protection against freezing. So we've got a number of levels of freezing protection in this system. I'm not talking about defrost, which is where the air heat exchanger and the heat pump, if that forms ice on it, then that needs to be regularly melted off, and that's our defrost function. So what we're looking at here is the actual freezing protection, the potential for water to freeze in the pipework that's outside the property. Obviously, insulation is your first line of defence, but there are a number of active protections. The pump could circulate, so it literally keeps the water moving. Some heat could be put into the system, so that keeps it from freezing by putting some heat in. And obviously, it will do that automatically. It will look after that all itself. But what happens in your absolute worst case scenario? You get power cut in the middle of winter when it's -5 outside or something. However good your insulation is, eventually it has the potential for that to freeze. And obviously you particularly need to make sure water doesn't freeze in the heat exchanger of the heat pump. So we've got an accessory that comes as standard. It's not fitted as standard, but so it's quick and easy to put in, what we call an exogel valve, and that can actually drain down the water in the heat pump heat exchanger in that worst case scenario where the water's getting too cold and reaching the point of freezing. So that will drain down the heat exchanger to protect that. That's mandatory if you haven't got glycol in the system, and I'll come to that in a minute. If you have got antifreeze in the system, then you don't want to put that valve in. So when it thinks the water's getting down to sort of -1, it will drain that heat exchanger down. And that's installed on the water outlet pipe. There's a specific place for it to go on the heat pump. Protection for the pipe work, you could use glycol. Obviously that gives you protection down to whatever level you've dosed that to. it only offers you protection down to whatever level you've dosed that to. And it's a bit of a pain in terms of getting it dosed right. It takes longer, and glycol affects the efficiency. Absolutely that. So you can reduce the efficiency of the system depending on the dosage, 10, 20, 25%. So you could lose quite a bit of efficiency and even heat output from the system with glycol. So we're not saying absolutely don't use glycol, but our preference is not to use glycol. And what we're saying instead is install antifreeze valves. So similar to the Exigel valve protecting the heat exchanger in the heat pump, and they go on the lowest point of the pipework between the heat pump and the inside of the property. They're quick and easy to put in, 5-10 minutes as part of your pipework install. They're insulated. They've come with their own jacket. And when they sense that they're effectively monitoring the water temperature inside them, and when that gets down to -3, it will start dribbling water out, and in order to drain the water out of that pipework. When it comes back to 4 again, it will close, and you can refill the system again. Obviously, it might never happen in the lifetime of the heat pump. Power cuts are less common than they used to be. So it's really a sort of last line defence. There's no minimum operating temperature for it. It'll operate down to whatever sort of temperatures we get in the UK. And so that's what we're recommending that you use. If you're installing one in very cold weather, you need to be a little bit careful that the valve doesn't open before you've got some heat into the heating system. That's covered in our training course. That's how you can deal with that. But that is something that if you are replacing a boiler in very cold weather and you're doing it in -2 or something, then that valve will be open before you've had the chance to fill and warm the heating system. So yeah, there's ways around that. So I mentioned you don't need F-gas, so this is purely a plumbing exercise. If you can install a boiler, you can install one of these heat pumps. Because there's no sort of funding for the UK, there is funding for Scotland. Obviously, assuming that none of you are working in Scotland, there's no funding available for this. But we've looked at this. If people need to upgrade their insulation, need to upgrade radiators, need to put in a hot water tank, one of these hybrid installations can still be cheaper than a bus-funded monoblock heat pump system, and quicker. So it's not necessarily. It certainly was at 5,000. Obviously, it's getting a bit closer now. That bus funding's got up to 7,500, but it's still. As I mentioned before, monoblock, you might need to change the radiators. You've got to put in a hot water tank. So even where it's cost comparable, the hybrid might still have the edge on speed of installation, the amount of disruption that the end user wants, and the amount of time it will take for to replace a broken boiler. It doesn't. No. It's what we call add-on. So when you've got both of our components, we sort of refer to that as our standard setup. We've also got an add-on setup. You can add that to an existing combi boiler system, but you don't get the hybrid operation. So it will swap from heat pump to boiler, and you haven't got that bit in the middle where you can operate both, because another boiler can't talk to the heat pump to coordinate each other to get the best operation.
The advantage is you can use any size heat pump then.
Well, we're thinking about the other way around. Is our heat pump. So that's a 4 kilowatt heat pump.
Yes, if you have a bivalent system, you could put a 9.
You could use other heat pumps of ours on an add-on hybrid basis. Yeah.
We did for our MCX.
Yeah.
We're all going to skate the bottoms again.
So it's just based on. I'll refresh my memory on that. I've not looked at it. Yeah, let me double check that, because I didn't cover that bit before when I was looking at this.
There's a little piece of screw onto the heat pump,
Okay.
and then it wires through.
Yes, of course it.
So
Yes, of course it does. Yeah.
it's just an extra little piece of it.
So we did quite a lot of research sort of ahead of this campaign on installation time. So we canvassed quite a few installers. We went and visited a couple of installations to actually look at the practicalities of installing one of these, and the conclusion was 1 to 2 days. A couple of days if it's the first one, you might be able to get down to 1.5 with a bit of familiarity. It's connect and notify for the power networks, so that makes that job easier as well, particularly if you're on sort of time pressure for replacement. So we looked at 8 to 12 hours was typical, where you've got the heat pump the other side of the wall from the boiler. So where you've got a relatively short pipe run. So obviously, if that's further, then that might increase your installation time a little bit. That 12 hours did also include flushing and upgrading the fuse board. So again, familiarity would get those times down, but 2 days should cover it for most installations. So that means more jobs, more heat pump installations, and the training to benefit that is available from us, and it's available from sustainable home centres such as Viva Training. So it's less disruptions, less time without heating and hot water for the homeowner. So I mentioned before, this is our hydro split concept. So unlike the first generation of hybrid, it's only water between the indoor unit and the outdoor unit. So the refrigeration system is completely contained within the outdoor unit. No refrigerant can possibly leak indoors. If some people are concerned about things like that, although they're quite comfortable having fridges and freezers in their kitchen. So no, it's not a concern. But some people think that that's something they don't want. So it's just a plumbing exercise to get the two connected together. And we're using R32 refrigerant for this, so that's highly efficient. It can be recycled, and it's far more cost effective than R410A, which is what R32 has largely replaced in recent years. So better for the environment as well.
Taking the hybrid to a 290 out 290.
Not at the moment, but obviously there's got to be careful where you install R290 in relation to a boiler and flues and things like that. So that sort of limit, you could have these quite close together either side of a wall. You might not be able to do that with R290, so there are some limitations. So it's not driving this product down the route of R290 at the moment, but obviously who knows where it's going to develop in the future. We've got a Nectar app, which you can go on a homeowner's smartphone, so they can control their heating system. That's cloud-based, so we need to connect the heat pump to Wi-Fi. It's not included as part of the pack, but it's available as an option. We've got our LAN adapter, so that you can connect the heat pump to the internet, and then the whole thing can be connected together with the smartphone app through our cloud services, and that gives the user the possibility to control their heating system through through their phone, and the user interface is on the app rather than the controller that.
If it's connected to
Not yet. we are working on Daikin Cloud Services for exactly that sort of installer access behind the scenes, and that is something that we are expecting to have available probably within the next year. It's not confirmed and definite yet, but that sort of thing is coming. So that you could then as the installer of the system, you can dial in, and you can to save you even getting in your van or car to have a quick look at the system and even tweak some settings if you can see something obvious You're like, right, I'm going to try that. But also it would keep a log of things like that, so you can see what you changed and when, and you can then see the effect that that had. So we're working on all those sorts of things to be able to sort of give you a little bit of remote support options in the future. And we've got our end user warranty as well, so if there is a product fault, then we will deal with that. As I mentioned before, that's 7 years when it's purchased through our sustainable home network. So the user will register their system. Well, you will. How it works is you will register the system, the installation on the Stand By Me platform with your Stand By Me login. The end user then registers themselves as a user on the Stand By Me platform, and you send them a link in order to access the installation that's been set up, and then that will get linked behind the scenes, and they can start using their connector if they want to, or enable their warranty there as well. So they've then got the facility to contact Daikin in the event of a product problem.
How many engineers do you have?
How many engineers? I can't remember off the top of my head. It's something like 100. But something that has happened last week is that we have acquired another service company, and they've got 450 engineers, and they will all be trained up in due course on servicing our heat pumps. So we are transforming our service network in terms of residential. Obviously, Daikin grew out of commercial. The sort of air conditioning you get in offices and commercial buildings and things like that. But the demands of residential are slightly different, so we're on that at the moment, and we are transforming our after sales as we speak in order to give users what they need for that. So we're big on training. We've got the capacity to train thousands of people every year, either through our own centres: Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, Woking. Birmingham's our sort of flagship hub for heating, if you like. We've got quite a new showroom that's been put together there. But we've also got our sustainable home network. So exactly like this, you can come here for training on different products and get exactly the same training, exactly the same quality of training that you would get from a Daikin centre as well. So that transforms the capacity for us to be able to train people on our systems. Because it's in our interest that the heat pump system's installed well. It's in your interest that the heat pump system's installed well. You want to know you've done it right, and you want to leave the job and know that you're not going to have to go back again in a few days' time. So we're always releasing dates for new training courses. They come out every 3 months, sometimes monthly, depending on how they're scheduling things. And we've also got the training offered by our Sustainable Home Network as well.
How long is the training? How many days?
So I think it's covered in the video, which I'm about to show. But essentially it's 1 day. It's a full day, so it's a full. I've done 3 of our installation training courses myself. They're 1 full day, sort of 9 to 4. They're free, so you get your money's worth. You get lunch, and yes, so you will get everything you need to get one of our systems up and running. So there's one for hybrid, there's one for monoblock, there's one for refrigerant split, there's one for our HHT hydro split system. But we also have level 2, which goes into commissioning of systems. And for those that want it, we've got level 3, which is servicing and maintenance and repairs. But obviously that's depending on the company, individual company, whether they want to go into that sort of level of detail. But we've got a comprehensive training platform, and as it shows there's a specific dedicated link for our training portal there as well.
Hello, my name's Ian Judd and I work for the Daikin training team. It's going to be my pleasure to take you through the training journey for the hybrid monoblock. You've seen the product management presentation, you've seen the sales presentation. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about hybrid monoblock training with Daikin. At Daikin, we believe that training should be an immersive and interactive experience. As such, we've moved away from umpteen PowerPoint slides and more towards workbook-based tasks that actively involve you in the training. If you come on the hybrid monoblock training course, you can expect to pick up hints and tips to ensure that you have a stress and trouble-free installation, and more importantly, your customer is happy at the end of the experience. To be honest, installing the hybrid monoblock system is no more complicated than installing a gas boiler. In fact, you've got all the skills that you need already. We're just going to fine-tune them. And as you would expect, because we talk about safety critical settings on the gas boiler, to come on our training courses, you must be gas safe registered. What I'm going to try and do is take you through the topics that are covered during a normal training day. The topics are wide ranging and should equip you well for when it comes to your first hybrid monoblock install. The first topic that we cover in the training is documentation. This might sound a bit of a stale topic, but actually it's really important. When your kit's delivered to site, you'll have countless cardboard boxes, and inside each of those cardboard boxes, you'll find a set of instructions. Those instructions talk about the specific component that they're packed with. So for example, when you open up the box that the outdoor unit is packaged in, you'll find there's a set of instructions. That set of instructions only talk about this outdoor unit. They'll tell you all you need to know about the outdoor unit, but won't actually tell you how it integrates into the system. To learn how it integrates into the system, you need a document called the Installer Reference Guide. The Installer Reference Guide takes all those individual books, amalgamates them all together, takes out any overlap, and hey presto, you've got a definitive document for the system. Daikin has a full suite of support literature to go with this system, and during the early part of the training course, you'll be told where to access that literature. As you've seen in the previous presentations, the system can be installed as either instantaneous domestic hot water, so in other words with the gas boiler operating as a combi, or with stored hot water. The training course will of course explore both options. There are certain items that you must have, and there are certain items that are optional extras. Again, the training course will help you to explore these optional extras and help you to decide which maybe you want and which maybe you feel you can do without. I guess an obvious place to start is with the outdoor unit. We must take care when we locate the outdoor unit. I guess you're wondering what we need to consider. Where could we look for information about what we can and can't do when it comes to placing this outdoor unit? I think you're probably ahead of me. It's of course the document I spoke about earlier on, the Installer Reference Guide. The Installer Reference Guide will guide us as to clearances. The unit will need to be so far away from a wall. We'll need to have clearance to its left and clearance to its right. And most importantly of all, we'll need to have clearance in front of it. If you think about the air, we're taking the air onto the unit, we're extracting energy from the air, and then we're discharging that air. On average, there's a 7 to 10 degree difference between the temperature of the air going onto the unit and the temperature of the air coming off. You think about an average winter's morning, if the air's going on at 5 degrees, it's actually coming off at -5. What we want to make sure is that that cold air disappears. What we don't want is that cold air to be recirculated back into the unit, because that's going to cause a drop-off in efficiency and a drop-off in the performance of the unit. So during the training course, we'll learn about the placement of this unit. Noise is another consideration. Noise both for our customer and perhaps for our customer's neighbours. These units are incredibly quiet, but we still need to consider any noise that might be generated. And one that you might not think of is drainage. These can produce water, and we need to ensure that there is somewhere for that water to go. Imagine if there is no drainage and the water spills across the patio, freezes, and your customer comes out the patio doors and slips over. Not really a great way to build a relationship with your customer. So there are considerations, we'll run through them all in some detail when and if you come on the training course. Another component that we've got to have is of course the gas boiler. The gas boiler can be purchased with a mounting jig. The mounting jig is an optional extra, but for me, I wouldn't even consider installing the kit without it. The mounting jig gives you all your isolating valves for the gas boiler, also gives the expansion vessel. As we've already said, the boiler can be installed as a combi or as, in effect, a system boiler with stored domestic hot water. Doesn't matter what type of boiler we're using, we're going to need a flue, and we have the normal range of fluing accessories. As standard, the boiler comes with a 60-100 flue connection, and the flue can be horizontal, low profile horizontal, or vertical. There is an option to go up to an 80-125 flue, which obviously will give you much longer flue runs. Fluing clearances are covered in detail during the training course. A concern for most installers is the wiring of the system. The good news is the system is probably easier to wire than your existing gas boilers. In the world of Daikin, our terminals are clearly identified, normally with the letter X, a number, and then the letter M. The numbers are unique, so there's no problem finding the correct terminal strip. The demountable connections are all numbered, as you would expect, and beneath the numbering, there's a description of the item that connects into that particular terminal. Controls wiring straightforward. If you come on the training course, you'll go away with schematics to help you with this. There are, of course, 2 power supplies required, one for our gas boiler and one for our outdoor unit. The gas boiler, standard 3 amp supply, so will come off at the house ring main. It's a separate supply for the outdoor unit, and a 20 amp supply will be required. The refrigerant circuit is all done at the factory, so the connections on site are all water connections. Simply pipe work between the outdoor unit and the boiler, and then back to the outdoor unit. Just to put a little bit more meat on that bone, we go from the flow connection on the outdoor unit to the return connection on the boiler. We pass through the boiler, out the flow connection of the boiler, to our heating system, or if we've got stored hot water, to either our heating or our hot water cylinder, and then we return back to the outdoor unit. So I guess the easiest way of thinking of it is that the boiler is in series with the outdoor unit. To enable that to happen, we go back to the previous section, the wiring section. There are 2 wires that go from the outdoor unit to the boiler. Within the boiler, there's what we call a loop module. The purpose of the loop module is basically to translate whatever language this outdoor unit talks to a language that the boiler understands. So you can see that the 2 components are working together seamlessly. The customer has no idea whether the outdoor unit's working, whether the boiler's working, or whether they're both working together. The brain of the system will make the decision, and it will make that decision based on 4 things: the current required flow temperature, the current ambient temperature, and the all-important price of gas and price of electricity. This hybrid operation is covered in some detail during the training course. As we've already mentioned, the skill set required to install the pipe is exactly the same as you have for a gas boiler. Really, the big difference is we have to consider 2 factors when we install a system like this. We have to consider the free volume of water in the system. So in other words, the amount of water in the system that cannot be isolated from the outdoor unit. We also need to consider the flow rate of the water around the system. Now this probably sounds quite complex, but it really isn't. And again, during the training, we'll show you easy ways to address this to ensure that neither flow nor volume ever causes you an issue. As we've already heard, the system can be installed for instantaneous hot water, so with the boiler acting as a combi, or with stored domestic hot water. So in other words, we have a hot water cylinder. If we have a hot water cylinder, we're going to require a diverter valve. At Daikin, we use the ESB diverter valve. The ESB valve is a true diverter valve. And what a true diverter valve means is it can only do one thing at a time. It's a little bit like me. It will either feed the coil on the cylinder for domestic hot water production, or the radiators if heating is required. The ESB valve can be installed in a number of ways and can also be set up in a number of ways, and this can cause confusion. During the training course, we'll take you through in detail the best ways to install the valve and the best ways to set the valve up to ensure that you have a stress-free installation. Once the installation is complete, the job is far from over. The next consideration is system water quality. It's a bit of a hot potato in the industry at the moment. BS 7593, which is the British standard for water quality in domestic heating systems, is now closely entwined with Part L of the building regulations. When you notify the installation of your heat generator, you are indeed stating that you have complied to the British standard as far as system water quality is concerned. Now the good news is this is no more onerous than it is for a gas boiler. All it's asking us to do is to ensure that our system's clean. So in other words, we've cleaned the system with a chemical cleaner post-installation. It's asking us to ensure that we've correctly dosed the system with inhibitor and biocide if required. So no more onerous than when you install a gas boiler, an LPG boiler, or indeed an oil boiler. And of course, we mustn't forget the requirement for a system filter. Our outdoor unit does contain a strainer. That strainer is last gasp protection. The system should have its own filter. And again, the British standard and Part L tells us that. So once you've dealt with your system water quality, we're almost at the stage where we can start thinking about setting the system to work. When we initially turn the power onto the system, the controller will come to life. Now it's important not to get too excited when the controller first comes to life, because the first thing that will appear on the controller is the Quick Start Wizard. The Quick Start Wizard is a simple way of beginning the setup process. The wizard asks you a number of questions, and all you have to do is answer those questions. In fact, if you look in the installer reference guide, there's a list of the questions that the controller will ask you, so you can prepare. So when you actually turn the power on for real, you know your answers and you can go through the Quick Start Wizard. Some of the questions are very basic. What language would you like me to speak? Well, English would be good, I think. Do I have a domestic hot water cylinder attached to me? If you say yes, then obviously it knows that it's stored domestic hot water. If you say no, then it knows it's instantaneous hot water. It'll ask you the date, the month, the year, and many other questions. Again, you'll be walked through the Quick Start Wizard during the training. Once you've answered the Quick Start Wizard questions, the controller has its basic setup done. Now don't worry if somebody gets a little overexcited on site and pushes a button and the Quick Start Wizard disappears. Now unfortunately, the Quick Start Wizard is a one-hit wonder. So in other words, once it's appeared and been populated, it disappears forever. But all those parameters are within the controller still, and you can still change those parameters. It's not the end of the game. Again, during the training course, you'll get detailed guidance on how to change those parameters. The key thing is, once you've populated the Quick Start Wizard, you're ready to de-aerate your heating system and your hot water cylinder. If you've got stored hot water, then there is a de-aeration program built into the controller. So you're at a point where you can start and run that de-aeration program. Again, this is all gone through in some detail, and if you need to refer to something when you're on site, again, you're probably ahead of me. The installer reference guide is your definitive reference source. The controller is the third mandatory item. It's the third item that we've absolutely got to have, along with the gas boiler and the outdoor unit. The controller is the brain of the system. It's where the installer does his configuration. It's where the main parameters are changed. Heating flow temperatures, domestic hot water storage temperatures, everything is done at the controller. A common misconception from customers are that if they want to change the temperature of the water in their hot water cylinder or the temperature of the water going to their taps instantaneously, they need to go to the boiler and start pushing buttons. The reality is no, the controller is the place that it's all done. It's the absolute brain of the system. The structure of the controller is broken down into what we call breadcrumbs. It's a way of kind of indexing the various settings. Again, you'll get plenty of a chance to practice this during the training sessions. The controller is easy to interact with and is protected against interference from the customer by a number of entry requirements to get through the different levels of the controller. Again, as an installer, you'll be given all this information on the training course. So as I just explained, all the main settings are carried out in the Daikin controller. As you can see, the boiler control panel has some buttons of its own. The buttons on the boiler are really for the installer. They're used during the commissioning process. We use these buttons to change parameters within the boiler. We also use these buttons to force the boiler to high and low fire for your combustion analysis when you commission the boiler. Clearly, we don't want the end user pushing the buttons on the boiler control panel. So to try and stop this happening, the boiler is supplied with a decorative cover which clicks into place and covers the buttons. Out of sight is out of mind, hopefully. One topic we haven't spoken about is just how easy the boiler is to convert from natural gas to LPG. The boiler will be delivered to you as a natural gas boiler. To convert to LPG, you'll need a conversion kit. The conversion kit contains simply a restrictor ring. There will be a natural gas restrictor ring on top of the gas valve in the boiler as delivered. Change the ring for the one in the conversion kit. Then there are 2 parameters to change within the diagnostics of the boiler. Once those parameters are changed and the restrictor ring is changed, it's simply combustion analysis to make sure the performance of the boiler is as expected. Once complete, the most important thing to remember to do is to hide those buttons away from the end user again. Right, thanks everybody for watching. I hope that's given you a real flavour of what the hybrid monoblock training course has to offer. The good news is the journey doesn't end there. These units will need service and maintenance, and as the installer, I'm sure you would be interested in picking the service and maintenance work up. And again, the even better news is within our training centres, we now offer service and maintenance courses. If you've been interested in what I've run through and feel that you'd like to sign up for a training course, please do so. Details of how to will follow this video presentation. We look forward to welcoming you into one of our training facilities in the not too distant future. Thanks for watching again, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much for that, Barry. And once again, thank you to Viva Training Academy in Halifax for letting us host this video here today. If you do have any questions on hybrid heat pumps, please put a comment below. If you've got any questions on anything to do with renewables, again, put a comment below. I've got battery storage and solar at my house as well, so I've got a little bit of experience with it. But as always, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.